What's going on, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Expected Bets for your go-to hockey podcast. I'm Patrick. Along with me today is one of my co-hosts, Franco. Betsky's out and about. I think it is real job. We were just kind of bitching about ours before this, and necessarily of just the time-consuming aspect of it. Yeah, how we doing?
I'm good. Yeah, work sucks as usual. I know Besky's probably feeling that right now. Maybe he'll hop on mid breakdown here, but yeah, I mean, it's fun doing this balance right now and going through these teams and seeing these changes, man. I mean, this one we're going to break down today is a interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, with the team previews too, it is nice to go through kind of individual teams. This is our new format. Obviously, the last two seasons, we kind of broke it down by division, and you kind of feel like a few names get lost here and there, especially on some of those teams that you don't necessarily follow. But kind of going through each individual team, it really feels like you're like, all right, I kind of have a grasp on the season, and you kind of hit the ground running per se, rather than scrambling to 2 or 3 days before being like, wait, he's not on this team anymore, so it is nice. But all right, today we are talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let's get into their team preview. All right, getting into the Tampa Bay Lightning. Franco, you had talked about it before in terms of the changes that this team is going through right now. I think obviously the biggest one, kind of the face of their franchise. Not really kind of. He was the face of their franchise. Steven Stamkos out the door to Nashville, of all places. Certainly going to be an interesting team for sure. But they do get back Jake Guentzel. They signed Jake Guentzel. He's now going to be on that top line with Point and Kucherov. It feels almost like a one-for-one swap, you'd say, in terms of offensive production. Guentzel's a little bit younger. So let's start with that in terms of Tampa Bay's biggest move, kind of the Guentzel and Stamkos swap.
Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, you lose Stammer all the years there, just like you said, face of the franchise and the person that was there through all of it kind of and the build back into a damn good team and all those Stanley Cup runs. And now you see him leave and then you're able to bring in a guy like Jake Guentzel. It almost doesn't seem fair, right?
Yeah.
Like we've been seeing this decline of this team the last like few years, right? Like just the inability to pay and extend guys and other teams just, ripping apart the pieces of these cup contenders the last few years. But I mean, it's a hell of a get for them to get Guentzel to replace Stammer. It feels like they're right back retooled and kind of ready to go again.
Yeah, it is certainly interesting. You mentioned kind of the retooling, right? Because we've seen some of these older teams as they kind of progress, like Pittsburgh, for instance. Pittsburgh kind of re-signed their core, but last year things necessarily didn't go their way. They were still kind of lacking a few pieces to kind of make the playoffs and get into, let's say, a cup contending run even more, trying to run it back one more time. So it is going to be interesting with the Lightning in that aspect. Their defense was also a big issue last year. They struggled on 5-on-5. They bring back McDonough this season. They also add J.J. Moser from Arizona, now Utah, as trying to bolster that core. Both are kind of defensive defensemen, which I think they desperately need. So what are your thoughts on those two guys coming over?
Yeah, I like it. I think McDonough's more sound defensively. I think Sergachev gives you a little more on the offensive end than McDonough does at this point in his career, especially. But sound, solid shot blocking defenseman. I know he's getting up there in age.
Yep.
And getting Moser, I mean, Moser's not that old either. You're basically swapping Dumba for him, who, they brought in, didn't really do much. I feel like he's kind of on the back end of his career at this point, not really living up to his expectations, being a first rounder. But yeah, this blue line actually looks pretty good. You still have Hedman, who's just rock solid. I don't know how they're going to lay him out. I know Daily Faceoff has Hedman with Radish, and that could change. Obviously, I'm not going off of that, but overall, the unit looks pretty good. I like it. I think this team just still feels like a contender.
Right.
Year after year, like you said, the retool. Like how do they keep losing pieces that feel like key important pieces and still being able to bring in these guys? And yeah, I like it. Looks good.
It's an interesting trend that I don't think it's brought up enough. Before, when a team would win the Stanley Cup, you look at kind of even the early 2000s and kind of even heading into the 2010s, they'd win the cup and then it would kind of be a mass exodus, right? But you look at Vegas, you look at Florida, neither of those teams really lost, you'd say, a ton of pieces, you know?
Yeah, I think these managers are getting a lot better at. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're doing a better job of just selling staying here,
Yep.
right? Like if you're a third or fourth liner that is a contributor in a way, right? Like you're given that incentive. Hey, like you can stay here and play on the third line. Yeah, that's not an ideal thing, and maybe you can get second line minutes on a San Jose or a bottom tier team here. But like, do you really want to sign like a 6-year contract for a bottom tier team playing second line minutes? I know the production is going to go up, but you're not going to be playing in the playoffs, and you're not going to be winning much. It winning kind of solves everything, right? So
Yep.
it's been impressive. The guys like Sorelli and Hagel and Paul that it feels like they're to the point where teams should be trying to steal them away, and they're still here.
Yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay winning 2 cups, Florida winning a cup, Vegas winning a cup. Not bad destinations as well, which I think is certainly plays a role into kind of some of those mid-tier forwards wanting to stay. We talked about the first round picks here. They also pick up Connor Geeky, Gergensons from the Sabres comes over as well. They're kind of more depth pieces. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Geeky here. He was in the WHL last year. We'll see if he makes this roster, but it looks like there is kind of a spot for him if they do kind of decide to shift those second and third lines around.
Yeah, I think the biggest worry and for me with this team looks like that second line right wing with Cam Atkinson. Again, this is projections based on daily faceoff, but I cannot see him realistically being on that line. This is a guy that 2 or 3 years ago was very good. He
Yeah.
had a major injury, missed basically the entire season, came back last year, and he could not even he should not have been even playing on the Flyers. Let's put it that way. He
Yeah.
Torts continued to roll him out there, and eventually he was scratched because of his just straight up ineffectiveness. And I mean, if you can't play on the Flyers, you can't make the Flyers starting roster, then how the hell are you going to be running out there with
Yeah.
this team who we're projecting as at least a playoff team? So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with that. To me, he shouldn't be. If he's doing anything, it's fourth line minutes, but or just a rotational piece to give guys rest and stuff like that. So maybe it is Geeky that takes that spot, which I like that upside. He's still young. Maybe he has something, and you got to kind of give guys a shot when you're have all the money tied up in your absolute studs like Point and Gensel and Kucherov.
Yeah, getting younger on the offensive side of things seems to be a theme as their 2 trade deadline acquisitions, Matt Dumba and Duclair, depart as well. It's going to be interesting too. So before we kind of talk about this revamped power play that is going to have a lot of questions, Vasilevsky started the season on it. Was he? He was out for at least a month or so, I believe, to start the season. Jonas Johansson came in, and we kind of thought he was going to. He was what he thought we was. Like we pretty much expected him
Yeah.
to play subpar, and he did. That's what I'm trying to get at here. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how Vasilevsky, because he didn't look himself last year. Like he wasn't kind of how he looked in years past. So, what are your thoughts on kind of him now, kind of getting back to this goaltender #1 workload?
Yeah, I mean, he has a full off season to get right.
Yeah.
Relatively early exit based on from the playoffs, based on their more recent seasons, obviously. So
Yep.
that I think that helps a lot. And yeah, I don't think he ever really looked right for the majority of the season last year. So that we're talking about the forwards and the defense. We still have this guy in that who, if he returns to form, I mean, it's a cheat code in itself, right? He's
Yeah.
one of, if not the best goalie in the league. But yeah, if he's right and he's back to normal, and you can just slot in Johansson for 15 to 20 games in a season and let Vasti just ride, this team is just going to be solid. So I'm excited to see Vasi back in form. I hope he is, and it's good for the league.
Yeah, just tell Johansson to kind of keep his bags packed for whenever they go on their West Coast road trip and he needs a day off. That's going to be kind of his role this season,
Yeah.
it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, as I mentioned before, the power play, so they lose Stammer, which is kind of that key piece there. But Kucherov is still on this team. He's going to be kind of that guy right in the slot. And Gensel replaces now Stamkos on that power play, so it still should be pretty deadly. What are your thoughts kind of on, I mean, what, last year they led the NHL with 19 with 19 goals Stammer had on the power play too. So what are your thoughts on this power play? Sorry, I was just trying to read stats quickly here and go back, but I'm basically just trying to figure out what this revamped power play is going to look like.
Well, I mean, I know Pittsburgh had a bad year on the power play. Obviously, Gensel was there, but he's still a good player. I think he's not Stammer in the sense of being like that elite sniper type of guy, but Stammer's also on the downturn of his career as well. So I mean, I don't know that he's even really the guy we think of anymore at this point. You have
Yeah.
to also remember, like, as much as we think of Kucherov being like the passing guy, and I feel like the media has kind of painted him in more of a negative light, like over the last year or two, with this, just laziness or whatever you want to say, right?
The All-Star game
This,
didn't help.
yeah, you see that in the All-Star game, you see him not skating and stuff, and it's just like, come on, is that really the guy that it is? He's also a guy that puts up 144 points last year,
Yeah.
44 goals.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's that negative connotation to him, but this is a guy who put up 44 goals last year. Now you're getting a guy like Gensel who can pass pretty well. I almost feel like it's gonna. I can't even say that Kucherov's gonna score more goals, but in a way, it feels like he's gonna have to score. I don't know if it's more than 44 because that's a lot of friggin' goals, but yeah, I feel like he's going to be the focal point. Maybe Point steps up more and scores more goals because I feel like Gensel's more of the setup man than the true sniper. Let's put it that way on the power play.
Yeah, we can get to some team and player props in a bit, but yeah, I've one of those guys on that top line who I really like for his goal total this season. All right, before we get into the best worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor, BetterHelp. This episode of Expected Bets 4 is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever stopped to think about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, we don't always make the time to learn we used to when we were kids. Kids are constantly exploring and growing, but somewhere along the way, life gets busy and we lose some of that curiosity. What's something you've been wanting to dive into? Maybe it's cooking, picking up a new language, or even figure out your golf game to finally beat your new friend. Just because we're older doesn't mean we have to stop growing. In fact, therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder. It reminds you that your back to school moment can happen at any time. Therapy is not just for people who have gone through something major, it's for anyone looking to be the best version of themselves. Therapy can help you learn positive ways to cope with stress, set healthy boundaries, and tackle challenges with more confidence. It's really about giving yourself the tools to thrive and grow, no matter what stage of life you're in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Now back to the show. Getting into the best worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay Lightnings. Franco, it's just me and you today right now. So we're going to have to kind of split this. I'll throw the best case scenario at you for this Tampa Bay team because, right, we talked about it on paper. They are loaded. They should be a playoff team. But in terms of kind of how far they go into the playoffs, I think that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, you line them up with some of these other contenders. The most important thing that we always talk about is goaltending, right? So
Yep.
you have Vasi. you're automatically in the driver's seat, right? Toronto always has goaltending issues. So as good as we're looking at Toronto, and Florida obviously still has Bob, and there's good goaltenders in this division in general. Let's put it that way. Especially if we're thinking
Yeah.
that Swayman is going to be good for Boston. So I don't I
Hallmark in
can
Ottawa now.
yeah, I mean, I can see them though. I can see them still pushing. They still have a very good depth scoring. Um, the lines still look good even with the losses. So yeah, I think they can compete still. And they don't feel like as old as these guys are getting, it still doesn't feel like they're like past their prime, and you're moving on from Stammer and replacing with Gensel. So in a way, they've almost gotten younger a little bit. Obviously not on the blue line with McDonough, but again, that's another playoff vet, guy that blocks shots. You pair him with Chernak. I mean, is any team going to get 20 shots against them in the playoffs?
And yeah, and they're going to need a hell of a lot more if Vasilevsky returns to form too. You know,
Exactly. Yep.
so they could be kind of switching their play style a little bit. I know, kind of like we talked about before, when they were on that Stanley Cup run, they're pretty offensive based, and just kind of had Vasilevsky face 30 plus shots a night and stand on his head. So they could be a new look this year. In terms of their worst case scenario, I feel like it is another first round exit. They haven't won a playoff series since 2022 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like you said, they are kind of transitioning over to this younger team, right? They retool with Gensel. So it's not like they're really punting on this season per se. I feel like that's kind of their worst case, where they have another first round exit and all these offseason moves to try to stay a contender just doesn't work out. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it'll be hard for them to miss the playoffs, but yeah, I could see a situation where if Vasilevsky's not right, or this offense isn't clicking the way at least we think it's going to, that they could struggle in the playoffs. You lose those tight games or something because you're not getting the scoring. But I don't know. The more I look at this team, the more excited I am for them, and it's kind of just weird to me because it feels like we should be down on them because of teams just aren't good for this long.
Right.
Just eventually the bottom falls out, and I don't see it happening this year.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of thought it would once Stamkos left, and they decided they want to kind of continue this run in Tampa. So before we get into some team and player futures, I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor, DraftKings. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. The NFL season kicks off on Thursday night with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs are currently favored by 3, with the total being set at 46.5. If you're looking to place your bet on Week 1 NFL action, head over to DraftKings. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you just bet $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Only at DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Getting into some Tampa Bay Lightning team and player futures. Last year, they had 99 points. This season, 98.5. Franco, it feels like from everything we've kind of said that we're leaning over on this. I think the biggest thing, too, is the way they start. Last year, we saw that Vasilevsky injury really impact them the first month of the season and really get out to a slow start. So I think that could be kind of one of the main factors you look at when considering their regular season points. It's also kind of playing devil's advocate here, this top forward group with Gensel, the addition, they don't have the chemistry that they kind of did when they had Stamkos. So it may take a little bit longer to get going as well. What are your thoughts on this regular season points total at 98.5?
I feel kind of like I want to be wishy-washy on it just because in general we've been a little bit higher on some of the bottom tier teams in this division, and I think that gap is closing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like the more I look at this, and they had 99 or 98 last year, still pretty damn good, and that was with the struggles with starting Jonas Johansson way too many games. So, I feel like I want to go over here, to be honest with you.
Right.
I feel higher on this team than I do with the Bruins, I would say. Like if we're ranking these teams in the division, and I might even feel like they might be better than Toronto as well. Like we're going to talk about Toronto in a little bit, but I don't know how I feel about their goaltending and some of the depth pieces they have there. This depth feels a lot better. The blue line looks good. And like I said, you have Vasi, which is just not fair, it feels like. So 99 points for this team feels pretty good, to be honest with you. I feel like they shouldn't be at the outside or, on the fringe
The
of
wild
the
card
playoffs.
spot.
Yeah, that's not what I see from this lineup.
Yeah, no, I would agree. The playoff odds, they're currently minus 230 to make them, plus 185 for no. I think in terms of me, I'm just staying away from that. I feel like you're in agreement there. Yeah.
I agree.
The division odds plus 550 are pretty interesting, right? Because I'd like the Bruins at 5-1. Now we're getting the Tampa Bay Lightning at plus 550. It feels like this is another team that if everything does go their way at the start of the season, those odds are going to shift dramatically down to kind of the 3-1, 3.5-1 range.
Yeah, I think if I had a choice between the 5-1 on the Bruins and the plus 550 here, I think I would take a shot on the Lightning over the Bruins, to be honest with you. If I'm trying to go more of a long shot, I feel really good about Florida this year, so I still think they're the king of, or the king of this division, so to speak.
Yep.
I think Tampa can compete, so I don't mind taking a shot on them at that price. It feels pretty good.
Even the conference, I'm going to stay away from them at the Stanley Cup odds at 25-1. Kind of give it a month or so. I may not get as good of a price per se, let's say in a month or two into this season. But the conference odds at 12-1 are intriguing because, like we said, this team does have a ton of veteran presence on it. Their defense gets older. Vasilevsky is a known playoff performer. At 12-1, it's pretty intriguing to not look at that number and at least be slightly interested.
Yeah, I think it's whether you feel better about a young up and coming team across these two divisions in the East, or you want to stay with the vets and the more experienced team. And as much as we get excited about like big additions on these other teams or younger players coming up and getting better and growing, this team is still rock solid. So at this price, it feels pretty good. Obviously there's a few teams when we get to them that I think we're going to be high on when we get to the Metropolitan as well. So, but again, I mean, this team still has all of that experience.
Yep.
That feels like a good price.
Yeah, the conference is almost more intriguing than the division, right? Because it's kind of the Atlantic's top loaded, right? With Toronto, you have even Boston's up there, Florida right there, some of these other teams that could win this, but given the playoff experience that Tampa Bay possesses, they could be a dark horse, which is crazy to say looking at this 2 to 3 years ago, right?
It's weird that we're like on the surface underestimating this team in a little bit of a way. But yeah, I mean, they're not, at least after last year, the king of the division anymore, right? And you have teams in the Metro like the Rangers that have been really good the last few years as well. So can they beat those teams? It all depends on how stuff aligns in the playoffs too. If you get that easier route and other teams play 7-game series and beat the crap out of each other, you can fall into favor here. So again, I don't mind it at the price.
Yeah, for sure. Getting into some player props for the Tampa Bay Lightning. We're going to start with player points. Gensel's currently listed at 87.5, Braden Point at 90.5, and Kucherov at 114.5, fresh off 144 points last season, taking home the Art Ross. Betsky, I want to start with you here. Any of those names and numbers jump out to you?
I kind of magically appeared here, and my gut instinct is Point. The one thing that's going to be really interesting is I know we've seen some sneak peeks of how these lines actually or currently are projected to look.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if the offense gets spread around a little bit more, because Atkinson on the second line just leaves a lot of questions to me.
There's no way that's happening.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah.
So to me, Point is the guy who I know is going to be on the top power play, and he's most likely going to stay on the top line with Kucherov. So as much as I'm tempted on that Gensel line, I think I'd rather go for his goals.
Yeah, it feels like Point and Kucherov are kind of tied to each other, and then even Hagel and Cirelli are kind of tied to each other on that second line, and it's kind of mix and match from there whether Gensel fits in. I think Gensel's going to stick in that stay with that first line, excuse me. And then, yeah, Cam Atkinson currently listed on the second line like we talked about before, Franco. We don't really expect him to be there come opening night. I'll throw it to you now, Franco. Any thoughts on these player point totals?
Yeah, I think, like we said, Gensel for Stammer feels like even or maybe even kind of an upgrade at this point in their career. So I kind of like both Point and Kucherov, to be honest with you. I know Kucherov is at 114, which just seems like ridiculous. But, I mean, this is a guy that put up 144 last year. And you could argue he's almost getting an upgrade on his line if Gensel's there. I don't mind it. The guy is definitely motivated to put up lots and lots of points, and he's going to want to defend that. So I don't mind it. I don't mind him and Point, to be honest with you. I would take either of them.
Yeah, Kucherov doesn't have to worry about the All-Star break this year either, with the Summer Showdown or whatever they're calling it, whatever it is, the four countries. Whatever. He
wasn't too worried about it last year either.
Yeah, that's also very true. Yeah, and it was in Florida last year too, so he didn't have to travel. Is the Panthers hosted it, right?
It was in Toronto, I thought.
Oh, Toronto, you're right.
Oh, yes.
I was thinking of 2 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Betsy, before we talk about player goals, I wanted to talk to you about Connor Geekie in terms of does he fit into this lineup and kind of where, like, I know he was in the WHL last year, but is he going to be kind of part of this team, or what are your thoughts on him? Because he was on Arizona's first round draft pick a few years ago, last year?
Yeah, so he was 12th overall in the 2021 draft.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 2022 draft. He's a big boy. He seems to me like he's still a little bit of a work in progress. I think Tampa's best option here is to keep him in the AHL, and unless they have some really bad center injuries, bring him up then. But I think this is a kid that needs to work on consistency first, and he needs to be playing with high motor every game instead of every other game. And that's kind of what we've seen both through the WHL, and then I think he had some small stints on the Roadrunners last season for maybe the playoff run. I need to look that up. But regardless, I think he's still a year out.
Okay.
He's a kind of typical big center though. So I would, if you remember Martin Hansel, it's kind of along the lines of that, maybe less mean, a little bit more creativity offensively. It's going to be really interesting to see what this looks like once he hits this team, though, because he's going to be surrounded by some great players, even if it's playing with Hagel on the second line, or, man, I mean, what if he gets that shot at the top line and Point moves to the wing?
Yeah, I was going to say you probably don't want to pair him with Gergensons to start off his NHL career.
No,
it's just the
no,
curse, the first round curse. He would just project that onto Geekie.
When you look at their lines, you're either asking him to play down on the third line or fourth line if he were to make it today or right out of the gate. And that's not the type of player you want him to develop into. So, I mean, you want like a more creative Cirelli, a guy who can shut down, but who can also be a little bit more of a playmaker, or even if he turns it more into like a Nicholas Paul. But otherwise, you're going to turn him into his brother Morgan Geeky.
I was going to say that Shiri and Anisimont line kind of seems like a perfect fit for him, maybe in a year or so.
Yeah,
and you're going to learn from Nick Paul, who's literally the same type of guy, just big body, gets in there type of guy. So that's not a bad guy to learn from.
Yeah. Getting into some player goal props, Gensel's at 35.5, Point at 41.5, Kucherov at 36.5. I have one that I love here, Braden Point, over 41.5 goals here. Gensel now playmaker, Kucherov playmaker. Gensel, or I think Point had 40 last year. He had 46 goals last year. I don't see that production dipping below that number again this season here. So I'm very high on Braden Point this year, over 41.5 goals. Franco, did you have any thoughts on the goal props?
Yeah, I think Point's probably the one to go to. I know he's the highest one. Typically, we've been going on the lower end guys on these shows, but yeah, like you said, surrounded by two playmakers. Even if Gensel moves off that top line, he's still with Kucherov, who's going to put up a ton of assists. So I like it a lot. I think this power play is going to look pretty damn good too. So he'll be the sniper on it.
Yeah, Betsky.
Yeah. No, that is definitely my favorite here too. Gensel racked up a ton of goals playing next to Sidney Crosby for all of his career, but he isn't just a sniper. And Point on the power play just plays in front of the goaltender anyways. So Gensel knows how to rip them. Gensel likes throwing pucks, but he does it in a way that it's not always just going for the shot. He's really good at trying to place pucks for rebounds for guys, and I think that's going to just feed right into what Point likes to do on the power play here. So Point power play prop at home is going to be a
chef's kiss. Yeah, that's a chef's kiss right there. Yeah, because it's going to be plus money throughout the entire season as well.
It will, yeah,
which is just fantastic. Yeah, and Stamkos kind of was that main guy on the power play last year with the majority of his goals coming on the power play. So it is going to be interesting, especially the first week or so. Maybe I'll hold off it on the first week to see kind of what chemistry they have. But again, you could be losing out on some value there. So getting into some trophies, the Rocket Richard, the Art Ross. Kucherov won the Art Ross last year, currently 6-1, Points at 100-1, Gensel's at 120-1, the Rocket Richard, Gensel 50-1, Point 25-1, and Kucherov 50-1. Any of those kind of intrigue you guys?
I had to look it up because Gensel initially for the Rocket kind of caught my eye.
Okay.
But again, like I need to see somebody who's gotten to 50 at this point, at least at some year of their career, and he never has quite gotten there. So I don't know if I'm willing to take that risk, really. I think
Point at 25-1 then.
Yeah, maybe, but same capacity though. When you have both of those guys able to do it, it kind of worries me. So if anything, I kind of like Kucherov for the Hart. I mean, you could have argued that he should have won it last year. I mean, I think more so than McKinnon, he put the team on his back, and I will fight that battle. Because this was a team who did not have Vasilevsky for the first 2 months of the season and literally had to outscore everybody in order to win games. And it didn't get that much better when Vasilevsky was back. This was a team that really kind of struggled defensively, and it just had to be run and gun. And I mean, he did something we haven't seen in 30 years with the 100 assists, and he was right up there with everybody else as far as the point race. And I think the All-Star break kind of tainted the way people were voting for it. And I think if he can repeat that, it's going to be really hard not to want to hand it to him, because this would be the first time in his career, correct? I don't believe he's won it.
No, he has not. And that, yeah.
I think anytime you have a reason not to give it to McDavid, you have to take it, because otherwise he should probably winning every season, right?
Yeah, that point total of 114.5 could be, looking back on it, very stupid. He could soar over that this season.
Yeah.
And despite it being one of the largest numbers on the board, it's no doubt. There's really no question if he went over, people would be like, yeah, look at what he did last season,
Mm-hmm.
Franco,
I mean, he puts up 80 assists, or it's not that crazy to think about. That would be a down season for him after last year.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Bessie. I think the heart should be in consideration here at the price. We kind of already talked about before you hopped on that the aura around him kind of took a major hit last year of just after the All-Star break, and just people saying he doesn't skate, and almost comparing him to like what a lot of people do when they talk about Ovechkin and stuff, where it's just like you see those videos of him not hustling or whatever, but like this dude put up 144 points last year. Like that is not easy to do, regardless of if you're skating or not. I don't care. Like So yeah, I mean, I think it's worth a shot for that price for sure.
Yep. Yeah, looking at a few of the other trophies here, the one that jumps out is Vasilevsky to win the Vezina. I think at 12-1, that's not a bad price. We talked about there's some of their off-season additions on defense here. And despite it being an individual goaltender award, defense does play a role into this as well in terms of just trying to limit some opportunities. So did you guys have any thoughts on that, or any Calder or Selke talk?
I think Vasilevsky is a nice look here, but I think my concern, because he's kind of in that point where he's a little bit maybe 1 foot out the door of his prime, but goalies can kind of have long careers, so he's only 30.
Fleury won it in 21.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, so what? He was like 56 at that point, but
he just got his AARP card.
But I also really like goalies bouncing back after mediocre years, or what people would consider an elite goalie to have a bad year. And I would say Vasilevsky could have a really nice bounce back here. I think the only concern there for me is the win totals of the team, but maybe I'm underrating this team.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think the start of the season is going to tell us everything with this team too. They get off to a hot start. Before you were on, we talked about that conference odds at 12-1. Seem pretty interesting right now. More so than the division, just given the playoff experience that this team possesses.
Yeah.
And also factor in, they put up 98 points last year with Vasilevsky not coming until pretty late. Like I think it was like December or whatever, he came back, and he did not look right all year. So you got to figure if he bounces back and he's even close to the guy that we expected, he could certainly win the Vezina, and this team should be up towards the top of this division. So plenty of win opportunity. And also, I mean, you're not starting Jonas Johansson a bunch of times. It's just not. I kind of would have liked them to have brought somebody else in a little bit better than him, just to ease the burden on Vasi. But I think we're going to see a lot of starts for Vasilevsky this year, unfortunately.
Yep. No, I think that's maybe my favorite out of the awards now that I'm looking at it and we've talked it through. And I definitely agree with that. Those conference odds are pretty interesting too. Honestly, even the division, with just the fact that the team that wins this division may have 1 point more than the second place team.
Yeah, and kind of the Vezina talk of it being the playoffs being consideration. We found out last year that it was not, especially after Hellebuck's performance and him still winning that award. So even if things go awry in the postseason, it does not matter one bit. Any closing thoughts on this team, Franco?
I think we pretty much covered it. I'm excited for this team. I think more so when I was looking through the rest of this division, I felt really good about some of the more bottom tier teams. And now that I look at this and the way they've kind of built this blue line to be more defensive first team than they were last year, and you have the return of Vasilevsky, which could be massive, and not losing much or maybe anything at all with the Stammer for Gensel. I'm feeling pretty good about this team, and Yeah, I mean, I feel like we should do like a ranking or something when we're done all these shows of each of these teams where we're gonna put them. But I'm leaning more towards this team being in the top 2 or 3 of this division as opposed to on the fringe like they were last year of the playoffs.
Yeah, Betsky, any thoughts?
Yeah, I am really kind of turning my expectations around too. The more we talk about it, and this is a team that player props are glorious with because you get 1.5 lines on Kucherov, you get power play points for Point, Kucherov, and now Gensel. Victor Hedman assist has always been nice. All those guys' shots are fairly decent, and you get decent prices on this. And then even when you go down the line, Hagel's been great on the road. This is a team that just kind of circle night in, night out because there's almost always bettable options, and there's also always very nice parlay pieces. So this will be a well that you turn to all season long.
Yeah, the point shots on goal, maybe even more of a wagon per se last year than this year than last year. Just given that Gensel edition, which is going to be great. All right. Well, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We got tons of great content coming your way. Be sure to check us out on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors, BetterHelp and DraftKings. We'll talk to you guys soon.